Hello out there, we're on the air, it's hockey night tonight.
What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 10 of the Lighting the Lamp podcast. I am here with Steve.
Hello.
As always. And this week we've got some topics coming along. Kind of a quieter-ish week in the NHL. Minus one team that was very loud was the Devils, because there's a lot of noise around them, so we're going to get to them. But let's start out here. We're going to wrap up what we started to talk about last week. Bill Peters in the Calgary Flames. He is no longer part of the Calgary Flames organization. I think he officially, technically resigned, like in 8 million quotes. But we all know he was fired.
Yeah, I think internal pressure from the organization forced him out. I mean, it's just a bad look. Like, they couldn't keep him around, especially after, like, all that came through. And even after, like, he issued that, like, lame-ass apology that was like, I immediately apologized to everyone in the room, and everybody involved was like, no, you didn't. You literally didn't own up to any of this. Like, stop trying to cover yourself, like, now. Like, and then even, and, like, after the Carolina thing came out where he was physically abusive towards two players, and that was just a bad look. So I don't think Calgary had a choice, and I honestly don't think any team is really going to give him a chance anytime soon because, I mean, that would just look terrible. It's like he gets fired for being racist and abusive towards his players, and it's like, maybe he won't be like that anymore. It's like, no, that's...
You know, and I don't care how good of a coach you can be. You could be, like, arguably the best coach in the NFL, or the NHL, and you still should not have a job after the things that he did. So, yeah, that's kind of like that. I mean, we are hearing some more stories. There was a GIF that recently surfaced of Peter Laviolette punching Billy Lano in the back of the head on the bench, but Billy Lano himself came out and was like, it really is not as bad as it looks. We've been hearing stuff about Mark Crawford and all this, getting caught up in this, so it would not surprise me if we see more coaches being let go of positions because of these things surfacing, but yeah, and the Flames have looked better since Bill Peters left, so maybe that's I think they needed.
I think the media, like, sensations surrounding it also really, like, kind of help the team try to, like, now that it's all over, the team can just focus on playing hockey. I mean, and they honestly just might not have been responding to the coaching style anymore. I mean, you can only play for a guy that you hate for so long. I mean,
right.
Like, even, like, Toronto, I mean, they've looked better as of late. I mean, they've still dropped a couple of games here and there, but they haven't looked as bad as they were with Mike Babcock. So, again, it's probably, like, at the end of the day, you can only play for somebody you dislike for so long.
Yeah, and I think maybe next week we can do more of an in-depth analysis of Toronto with Babcock versus Toronto in the Sheldon Keefe area. So that is something to note, but that's just kind of, we just wanted to wrap that up and just say, like, we've been paying attention, and Bill Peters is no longer with that organization and probably will never be with another hockey organization in the foreseeable future, or hopefully ever. So we're going to move on from that, and we're going to talk about a couple teams here, specifically two, and we're going to start with a team that I think is one of the biggest anomalies right now in the National Hockey League, in the Montreal Canadiens. So when we were doing our season preview, the reason that I put Montreal where I put them, I believe I put them out of the playoffs by like 1 or 2 spots, and I said that their issue is going to be goal scoring. So I was looking at the roster and I said, okay, you got Tatar, Brendan Gallagher, maybe Max Domi, but I really didn't see guys that were going to be scoring a lot of goals on this team. And when we're looking at the stats right now, they currently sit 4th in the Atlantic Division. And they're still in the race, but what's keeping them in the race is their goal scoring. I mean, they're 9th for goals for per game and 28th for goals against per game.
Yeah.
Like, what, I want to get your thoughts on this. What do you make of a team that on paper shouldn't be scoring goals and should be more of a defensive team, and the opposite is happening? Do you think it's the goalies that aren't making the saves, or what are you seeing with this team here?
Well, I mean, you can see it with Keith Kincaid, right? In 6 games played, he had almost a 4.5 goals against average, and his save percentage was about 87%.
Who he's since been waived, and
yeah,
he's down in the AHL. They have Caden Primo up in the National Hockey League now,
and he lost in his NHL debut, but like that's not really his fault. But I mean, even Carey Price's numbers aren't great, so I'm not really sure what, like, I don't know what to make of this team because, like you said, like we looked at the up front and we're like, oh, I don't think they're gonna score a lot of goals. There's really no they have no game breakers, and especially once Jonathan Drouin went down with that injury after that hit from Ovechkin, which was questionable, but whatever. But he had 15 points in 19 games. So, that was a big part of their offense going forward, and he looked better this season than he had since probably when he played in Tampa Bay that season when Steven Stamkos went down with the injury, and they elevated him in the lineup. So he finally looked to be rounding out into the player they thought that he could be when they traded him, and they traded away Sergachev for him. But like you said, but they're getting contributions from weird places, right? Like Tatar and Gallagher, yeah, you'd expect, but Shea Weber to be number 3 on your team in points, tied for second actually on your team in points with Philip Deneau and Gallagher. Shea Weber is tied for 3rd on the team in goal scoring.
Yoel Armia has 10 goals right now.
Yeah,
I think he's a good player, but I don't think anybody would expect, 30 games into the season for this guy to be on pace for a 30-goal season.
No, not at all. He's always one of those players that given the opportunity, he probably could have played up in a lineup because he came over from Winnipeg, I'm pretty sure. And Winnipeg never really gave him the opportunity, and here in Toronto, here in Montreal, he's getting the opportunity to play up in the lineup. But he's also it's kind of like the Ottawa effect, right? Guys in Ottawa this season are having career years based on the fact that there's nobody else in that roster, so they're getting elevated positions, and they're playing Anthony Duclair is playing better hockey now than he's been playing all season, in his career, and it's because he's getting an opportunity to play, big minutes. So I think that's really what that is with Yoel Armia. But even still, Gallagher's got 13. Gallagher you expect to put up 30 goals, but he's not a game breaking goal scorer.
He's a go to the net, put in a rebound, get a deflection kind of guy.
Yeah. So it's just a really strange. Their power play is not particularly great. It's middle of the road. Their penalty kill is awful. It's bottom third of the NHL. Their goals against, they're one of the worst teams in the league.
Well, that's what I'm saying. When you look at the defense, Jeff Petrie, Shea Weber, Ben Sherratt, and Victor Mete, that's a pretty decent top 4.
Yeah.
Mete's young, but he's having a breakout year in terms of his all-around play.
And Ben Sherratt's a good defenseman.
And it was weird because when I was watching the Islanders play them the other night, they shut down the Islanders, which let's not pretend the Islanders are an offensive threat. But the funny stat about that was, sure, they shut down the New York Islanders. We only scored 1 goal. Shea Weber had to play 29 minutes in order to get that done. And he can't do that every night. I'm
Not
sorry.
Anymore, yeah.
Shea Weber cannot play 30 minutes a night at the age that he's at. So it's weird because you're seeing, the goals against is the issue for this team when really you would think it would be the opposite way. And I pulled some of their advanced stats here. Currently they're 17th in high danger chances against. So they're letting up more high danger chances than league average about. But then the biggest kicker, I think, is the 23rd in high danger goals against. So, sure, they're letting up about league average or a little bit more than in high danger chances, but they're just not getting the saves for those chances. They're 19th in high danger save percentage.
Right.
So it's weird because it's they're not letting in that many high danger chances. They're kind of middle of the road, but the other teams are converting on those high danger chances. And so I don't like blaming the goaltenders, that I usually like to look at the team's defense, but maybe it's just been a situation where Price just at the beginning of the year, let's be honest here, he was having a pretty bad year.
Yeah.
Especially by Carey Price standards. And maybe that's just it. Maybe this team defensively really is better than it seems. As of late, late November, early December, they've been playing pretty good defensive hockey, but
they lost 8 straight. They
Yeah.
were winless in 8 straight, and they got a point in 3 of them. But for the most part, it's that really seemed to sum it up. Was but they were losing games big. They were giving up a lot of goals, and it was really uncharacteristic, especially for a Claude Julien coach team. Which if you're familiar with his track record with the Boston Bruins, that was a really heavily defensive team. They weren't that fast. They really didn't score that many goals, and then they let him go and they bring in Bruce Cassidy. Now the Bruins are a fast skating team and probably the best team in the NHL this season. But you think that Claude Julien would come up and that's kind of his thing. He takes teams that aren't that talented up front and he turns them into winners because he usually has an elite or an above average goaltender with some solid defensive pieces both up front and in the back end. And looking at this roster, this is a Claude Julien roster. I mean, you have Carey Price, who's arguably top 5 goaltender in the NHL, just based on talent alone. You have Jeff Petrie, Shea Weber, Ben Sherratt, and Victor Mete. Like you said, like that's a solid top 4. I mean, their bottom 6 isn't like great, but like it's not gonna break the bank either. It's not like they're playing some plugs. Like they're
playing like 16 minutes a night.
Like those are serviceable guys.
When you have Jeff Petrie and Shea Weber eating up nearly 24 minutes each,
and Ben Sherratt's right behind them with almost 23 minutes a night. So, I mean, it's just a really strange situation. Like this team should not be scoring goals the way it's scoring goals. But it's not like their special teams are getting it done for them, right? Like I was saying, like their power play is league average. It's 15%, like 15th in the league at 19%. That's a decent power play. But when you're firing on league average, but you're scoring your goals for per game is above league average.
You're top 10 for goals for.
Yeah, it's just a weird conundrum. I mean, the other thing is like you said, like they're high danger shots, but like they're giving up a little more than league average in shots. They're giving up about 32 shots a game, which isn't terrible, and they're giving up, so they're about on par. Like they're 17th in shots against, and they're 17th in high danger chances against. So they're giving up like about like a little less than league average, or a little more than league average, I should say. So it's like, it really just looked like the goaltending was bad, was really rough to start the season. And I don't want to, like you said, I don't want to point the finger at Carey Price and say this is the reason that they struggled, but it hurts when the guy you need to start 65 plus games is struggling and he's not doing well, and Keith Kincaid is also struggling and you can't rely on him to get anything out of him, which is like the opposite problem that like you see in Pittsburgh right now. Whereas Matt Murray's struggling a little bit here in the month of November. Jari comes in and he's 6-1-0 in 7 starts in the month of November.
He's had 2 shutouts with that as well.
Yeah, and he's 2 shutouts in back-to-back games. So like, that's what's keeping Pittsburgh afloat. And it's, you know, when your starting goaltender struggles, your backup needs to sometimes pick up the slack. And I really thought Keith Kincaid could do that for them this season, considering he did it for the New Jersey Devils for a lot of years behind Corey Schneider. I mean, hell, he was the starter in New Jersey for a lot of years because Corey Schneider's groin is made of glass. But he just really seemed to struggle this year, and I don't know if it's the pressure, because let's not beat around the bush. Like, Montreal is a pressure cooker. When that team does not do well, it is hard to play in that building. It's
definitely significantly more pressure than a team like the Devils, who aren't expected to make the playoffs. Arguably for all the years he was there, they weren't really expected to make the playoffs. They did, I think, in his first season, but they weren't expected to.
No, and the media that surrounds that team is not exactly great, considering they play in the tri-state area, and you have a team like the New York Rangers or even the New York Islanders, who are much more like, you know, media-centric teams, because let's face it, the New York Rangers play on 7th Avenue in the heart of Midtown Manhattan. Like, and the Islanders have just been really good as of late, which has drawn media attention, whereas like the Devils always fly under the radar. Even when they are good, people don't really talk about them. So it's like, but then he goes from that, where there's very little media coverage of the team he's playing on, to Montreal, which is the mecca of hockey. I mean, like, this team, these fans live and die by their Montreal Canadiens, and it's been 26 years, going on 27 years, that they haven't won a Stanley Cup. That's the longest drought in their history. So the fans are getting restless. The team that should have been competitive for a long time in the early 2010s wasn't competitive enough. And now this is a team that's in the middle of a rebuild, but it looks good enough on paper to make the playoffs. Probably.
I think I was reading something like this. If they miss the playoffs this year, I think that's going to be their longest playoff drought in like 50-something years or something like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, they made the playoffs every year pretty much from like 1955 to like 1996 or something stupid. Like, they were always in the mix, and it's like, I mean, granted, the NHL's not built the same way it used to be, right? Like, it's not, they have to draft well, and like Montreal hasn't necessarily drafted all that well recently. I mean, Nick Suzuki's in the lineup, and they got him via trade, and he's looked good. I mean, Kotkaniemi, I think, has gotten injured recently, or is he still playing?
He was the one that got, like,
he got dumped on his head.
WWE, like, power slammed into the ice, and that somehow wasn't a suspension.
I mean, I don't think it... Okay, so, on that hit, like, this is going back to player safety. I don't think Zadorov intentionally flipped him like that to hurt him.
No.
But I just think, like, you have to know, like, how much bigger you are than that guy, and you really can't. Because, like, if you see it, it's his back leg. He's trailing his back leg to try to get him to stop. Because, like, what you usually... Like, he was trying to pin him to the board so he couldn't turn back, and that's what that leg was there for. But when you get the guy and you flip him, that back leg just becomes... He tabletopped him. He flipped him over his leg, and Kotkaniemi's not a big kid. So he literally did, like, a cartwheel onto his head. it was just a bad situation. It was a situation that probably Zadorov should have just like pinned him to the wall instead of trying to kill him, like you said, WWE powerbomb style. But I mean, Kotkaniemi is a young bright spot for them, but he's not going to be a game-breaking goal scorer. Like, he's more of a Saku Koivu type player, which, that's nothing wrong with that. It's still a top 6 forward, serviceable, puts up his points, but...
Well, I mean, let's think about, like, who is arguably their biggest draft pick in the last 5 years, or maybe 6 years ago. Let's say, like, arguably their biggest draft pick in the last 10 years was Alex Galchenyuk.
And he busted out.
And he's now in Pittsburgh, where he's kind of been which is like, if you can't score playing for the Pittsburgh Penguins, like, I don't know what to tell you.
I mean, he couldn't score in Arizona when he had an elevated role. He's playing in their top 6. And this is a guy that I was really high on, and everybody was really high on after he scored 33 goals for the Montreal Canadiens that one year. And then I was convinced that the Montreal management mishandled him because they kept moving him from wing to center to this to that to wherever they wanted him in the lineup to, like, after he scored 33 goals for them playing down the middle. So, I mean, that could have had a long-term detrimental effect on his development because he gets shuffled around the lineup a lot. He's not getting the same opportunity. Yada, yada, yada. That could really be the issue here because then he goes out to Arizona, gets the minutes, but he's not really there. So they might have just, and I'm not blaming management. They really could have just messed him up. Like, that really could have been a developmental error, and he just never developed into the player he could have been after his 33-goal season. But that's you pick him number 3 overall. And, I mean, that draft was bad, though. It was 2013? Because it wasn't that Nail Yakupov going number 1 overall to the Edmonton Oilers, and then number 2 was, who even remembers?
The Edmonton Oilers, my God. I mean, let's be honest here, like, that, they shanked that draft. It was the 2012 draft. The top 3 picks were Nail Yakupov, Ryan Murray, and Alex Galchenyuk.
Okay, so the only one of those that has like even a serviceable NHL career is Ryan Murray, and he's playing in an elevated role in Columbus now.
And then Garth Snow went against what everyone thought he should do, and instead of drafting Matt Dumba or Morgan Riley, he took Griffin Reinhart. Yay!
I mean, but then so number 1, Nail Yakupov doesn't bust. Galchenyuk pretty much is a bust. That might be because he got ruined his development, but
Griffin Reinhart.
Ryan Murray's okay. Griffin Reinhart. But then you have Morgan Riley, Hampus Lindholm, Matthew Dumba, and Jacob Trouba in the next, 3 of the next 4 picks. Philip Forsberg, Slater Kuku, who didn't become anything for anybody, Mikhail Grigorenko. Like, this was just a bad draft. I mean, Vasilevsky was 19th overall, but
Cody Ceci, Tom Wilson's in there,
Tomas Hertl, Toivo Teravainen.
It's really the issue with that draft was, like, the expectations for that top 5 were so high, and, like, none of them really reached what they should have been, besides Morgan Riley.
Yeah, I mean, this draft was weird because I remember watching This World Juniors too for this year because the NHL was in the middle of their lockout. I remember really watching the
under 18s.
Yeah, the U18s, and I remember Galchenyuk being a monster for that USA team that won him, Seth Jones, that was just a great team.
That team was stacked. John Gibson, Seth Jones, Rocco Grimaldi, I think Frank Vetrano, Johnny Gaudreau was on that team. That team was actually stupid.
Yeah. Let's see. Who did Montreal draft in the next year? They drafted Michael McCarron in the next year, who hasn't had any sizable impact on their roster. He was in the 20s. They drafted him in the 20s, though.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Do you think this current iteration of the Canadiens roster is a playoff team?
If they, for some reason, can continue to score goals in the way they have, but can tighten up their defense, and Carey Price looks like Carey Price of the old,
Pasternak at 25th. That pisses me off.
Nikita Scherbak. They drafted Nikita Scherbak, who has had no impact on his NHL team.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Galchenyuk was arguably their biggest draft pick in the last while, and they haven't really
they've done nothing
pulled anything out of him.
I'm just curious to see who they've been drafting because it's this team. In all intents and purposes, Noah Juleson, 26th overall. He hasn't.
And to be fair to the Habs, they haven't really had that many high draft picks, but also because they keep trading away their high draft picks, and they're just not.
They got Mikhail Sergachev, who they turned into Jonathan Drouin. So that's not terrible. That kind of solves their issue up front because, let's be honest, Montreal for a long time was really heavy on the defensive side of the puck and not so much up front.
But arguably, they still busted that draft pick because Sergachev is not what they thought he was going to be.
I mean,
He's like a serviceable top 4. I would say he's a pinch top 4, perfect top 6.
I mean, Sergachev, I think, honestly, if his development continues, could be a number 2, number 3 defenseman on a lot of teams. And I think Tampa Bay knows that, so that's why they're playing him the way they are. But, like, the other thing with Tampa Bay is, like, he's playing behind... they can shelter him a little more than Montreal could have, because he's playing behind Victor Hedman and Ryan McDonough. So it's like, you can shelter him, whereas in, like, Montreal, he'd be playing up there with with Ben Sherratt, probably. He'd probably be playing over Ben Sherratt. So he'd be averaging probably 25 minutes a night, just like Petrie and Weber, which is he ready for that? Like, who knows? But now, like, I just want to see who else they've drafted. Let's see. Ryan Poehling, who's come up and played okay for them.
Yeah, the Canadiens have not
I mean, like you said,
had a good time of drafting.
But I mean, even
drafting
recently,
players.
like the draft, like they go number 3 overall and they get Jesperi Kotkaniemi, and when both Brady Tkachuk, Philip Zadina, Quinn Hughes, Boquist, Evan Bouchard, like Dobson, these guys, Joel Farabee, who's having a great rookie year. These guys are all still on the board. I mean, Keandre Miller goes to the Rangers there. Like, there's a lot of guys here that were still on the board that they arguably could have been better for them. So it's just, I don't know.
So I did cut you off. Do you think that this team will be a playoff team?
Yeah, I think if they can fix their goaltending issues and tighten up defensively, I think they can be a playoff team just on the strength of Carey Price being able to carry them. But I mean,
Do you think there's going to be a nuclear arms race between them and Toronto for a backup goaltender?
yes.
Because both of these teams absolutely desperately need a backup goalie. Because the funny thing is, all we've heard out of Toronto, and like, we're talking about Toronto again, but all we've heard out of Toronto is that Frederik Andersen shouldn't start any more than 55 games. He should be between 50 to 55. We need him to be fresh for the playoffs. That's the goal. And Frederik Andersen himself has said, I would like to start between 50 and 55. And if they don't have a backup goalie that can do anything...
That number balloons to like 60, 65 games.
And I went to bat for Hutchinson, but like... I mean, he's only had one game since he came back from the AHL. But he still didn't look great. And this team, arguably right now... They were talking about this on Sportsnet. Last year, the cutoff for the playoffs was 98 points, right? Currently, the Maple Leafs, and we can do this for the Canadiens too. So let's start with the Habs since you're talking about them. They have 32 points. They've played 30 games. So they have 52 games left, and they need 66 points, right? So if they have 52 games left, they need to go 33 and 19.
Yeah.
Which is doable. And especially considering that Buffalo right now sits in the 3rd Atlantic spot, and they also have 32 points in 30 games. So if anything, they're probably going to end up in a divisional spot because Florida is in the 2nd in the Atlantic with 33 points. The first wild card is the Penguins with 38. And the second wild card is the Hurricanes with 37.
Yeah.
So they're probably going to be gunning for that divisional spot.
Well, yeah, because otherwise they're going to be chasing a team like the Rangers, who... Wait, let's put it this way. The Rangers would be in the race for a divisional spot
in the Atlantic
division. They are 8 points back of a divisional spot in the Metropolitan. I mean, they're chasing 3 Atlantic Division teams right now, but those 3 Atlantic Division teams aren't gunning for the wild card. They're all gunning for divisional spots because
you're better off aiming for the division.
Because they're like you said, they're 6 to 5 points. They're all 6 to 5 points back of the wild card. And for the most part, they're either tied or 1 or 2 points back of their division.
Right. So for Montreal to hit 98 points, they need to, and not taking into account overtime losses, obviously, 52 games left. They need 66 points. They need to go 33 and 19.
Yeah.
The Maple Leafs need to go, I think, they have 31, so they have 51 games left. They need to go 33 and 18. So that's a hard sell for teams to go plus 14 over the course of the year. Let's compare that to a team like, New York Islanders, right? They have 28 games played. So they need to play 54, right?
Right.
They need to get to 98. They only need 48 points. So they can go 24 and... Hold on, let me... They need 98 points, so they need 48 points out of their next 52 games, right?
Right.
Yeah, so they can have a losing record for the rest of the year and still hit their number.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, these two teams don't. So I can see your point in saying, like, these teams might not be playoff teams just based on the fact that they have such a hill to climb, and that's assuming 98 points gets you in. Realistically speaking, looking at the Atlantic Division, you could probably end up with a divisional spot at like 92 points.
Yeah.
So their road might be easier, but
I mean, even still, to go 33-19, or what was it? Yeah, whatever.
to get 98 points was 33-19.
I mean, that's not impossible, but that's like a record you expect out of teams like the Boston Bruins or the Washington Capitals, who are sitting at, to start the season, are 24 or 20 wins, 4 losses and 6, and 22 4 losses and 5 overtime losses. So it's like that's kind of the record you'd expect out of teams like that. Like even teams that, even in their own division, 14-9-5, like 13-11-6. Like these are.
I mean, if you add your overtime and your regulation losses, right now the Panthers are 14-14.
Right, they're 500.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, I agree with you. I think this could be a playoff team, but I'm gonna say, as opposed to them solving their issues, I think they could be a playoff team just based on how weak the division is. Because I don't think. I mean, let's be honest here. Tampa Bay has been overwhelmingly underwhelming.
Yeah.
Which we can talk about them next week, because I do want to talk about them because they're a very weird team right now. But the Maple Leafs, underwhelming. The Panthers, underwhelming for the expectations that were put on the team.
But let's not say it. But as of late, the Florida Panthers have looked much better.
Oh yeah, no, they had a horrid start.
October was bad. Sergei Bobrovsky was bad to start the season. He looks a little more comfortable now. So I think they were underwhelming. They had an underwhelming start, but I think Florida's kind of right where we thought they'd be. I mean, number 2 in the division's pretty much sitting pretty. That's a pretty decent spot to be in. I mean, let's be totally honest. The Boston Bruins exceeded everyone's expectations by being as good as they are. And that's totally, almost entirely on the back of the fact that Brad Marchand and David Pastrnak are having career seasons. David Pastrnak has 25 goals in 25 games.
Yeah, and we all knew Pastrnak was good, but I don't think anybody was saying, oh, he could be a 60-goal scorer.
I mean, he's on pace for 60 goals.
Right.
I mean, that's how, this season's been crazy in that sense that, like, we always knew Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl were good, but they're both on pace for over 130 points right now.
Each.
Yeah, each. They're collectively on pace for up to 260-something points at the end of the season.
And yet they're only 1 point ahead of the Arizona Coyotes.
Well,
that blows my mind.
Well, Leon, there was a stat that came up. I was watching. So the NHL Network had bonus coverage of the last Oiler game in the third period, and it was saying that like Leon Draisaitl has contributed to 51% of the team's goals scored. He himself has contributed to 51% of the team's goals scored. That's not a number that's conducive to success, but they did exactly what we thought like better teams. We thought the Calgary was going to do. They beat up on a weak division. They're picking up points where they need to. And having 2 of the best players in the league play like 2 of the best players in the league every single night, no matter what, has offered them the opportunity to sit at the top of the division. And they could conceivably lose games. They could be like a 500 team the rest of the season and still make the playoffs because they gathered so many points so early. Because let's be honest, the rest of the teams in the division aren't going to catch them. The San Jose Sharks had a really terrible start. They're not going to catch them. Calgary would have to go have an insane run to catch them at the end of the season. The only teams that really could catch them are either Vegas or Arizona, and those are teams that have been keeping up with them pretty much all season anyway.
Right.
So, I mean, we went from Montreal to the Edmonton Oilers, but, like, I mean, it's just a comparison, I guess, based on the divisions.
We're just comparing the fact that, really, the Central Division is akin to the Metro, where it's, like, the division of death.
It's a war zone, yeah.
Where I think I posted about on Twitter, like, a couple days ago before the games that happened, like, 3 of the top 5 teams in the NHL were in the Metro Division.
Yeah.
It was Capitals, Islanders, and Flyers. And the Central Division is very much the same way, where it's, Blues, Avalanche, Stars, the Winnipeg Jets are a surprise. Right now, really the biggest disappointment in that division is probably the Nashville Predators, which I don't know what they're doing. But, I mean, you compare the top 3, the Blues, Avalanche, and the Stars, right?
Right.
To Edmonton, Arizona, Vegas. I mean, let's be honest here. Like, I could conceivably see any of those top 3 teams, the Blues, Avalanche, or Stars, playing for a Stanley Cup. I really can't see any of those top 3 in the Pacific playing for Stanley Cup.
I mean, I can see Arizona going deep because Arizona's playing a very, like, defensive style of hockey. Their goaltending's been very good for them. I mean, like, if Darcy Kemper doesn't even get a nod at the Vezina Trophy this year, that's a crime because he's been arguably the best goaltender in the NHL since the start of the season. And that's not to say Antti Raanta has been bad either. Antti Raanta has been very good for them. I mean, Vegas has been a team that's been underwhelming, especially with the way, with the talent that they've added recently. I mean,
They
to
just
add
seem
Mark
keep,
Stone.
like snapping up free agents.
I mean, with an expansion team, it's kind of like it was an interesting way they went about building a team. But I think their core. I mean, this is a bubble that's going to burst in a couple of years because a lot of their guys are older. I mean, Pacioretty's north of 30. Mark Stone's one of the younger guys in the team, but
Well, Fleury's not going to be Fleury for the next 5 years.
no. And Malcolm Subban's been good, but he's not prime time Marc-Andre Fleury.
No.
And that's really where a lot of their success is coming from, is the fact that Marc-Andre Fleury's carrying them.
Although Subban has been playing very good for them lately.
Oh yeah, no. I mean,
But
he beat the Rangers.
I don't think over the course of a 60-game season, he would have the numbers that he has.
No. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I think he's a very serviceable backup right now. I mean, he could be a number one in the NHL. The Boston Bruins thought he could be a number one. They drafted him to replace Tuukka Rask, but then they traded him. Or they lost him to the expansion draft or traded him. I don't remember.
I believe he got lost the expansion draft.
But I mean, nobody. But that's also to say, like, nobody was expecting Tuukka Rask to have the late, the resurgence he's having late in his career, because he's north of 30 and he's putting up numbers better now than he did when he was 25, 26. Again, the team's probably better around him, but whatever. But there's a lot of issues with that the Pacific Division. The Pacific Division is like the Atlantic Division, right? There are a lot of these glass cannon teams in that division. Specifically the Edmonton Oilers are a glass cannon. They have two of the most potent offensive players in the league, but if you get through them and you score, you're not
They could be this year's Lightning, where they could be swept out in the first round by some upstart blue collar, nose to the grindstone hockey team.
I mean, the Toronto Maple Leafs are a glass cannon for all intents and purposes. They can score a lot of goals, but
right now the Oilers would be playing the Jets in the first round. I could see Winnipeg beating them, even with that shoddy defense. The way Connor Hellebuck is playing,
I would put my money on Winnipeg over the Edmonton Oilers, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, just because of the way that Connor Hellebuck is playing, and even though that defense isn't great, it's a very simple, blue-collar, make-the-smart-play defense, which Edmonton struggles with because, they have all the skill and speed, but when the defense is, just letting you basically dangle yourself into the corner, it's really... Edmonton preys on teams with, super high-end, fast defensemen who want to turn the puck over and go up the ice, because, then they'll beat you in the neutral zone, and now it's a 2-on-1. But when you got guys like Neil Pionk, who's just okay, you can come to me. I'm not going to let you beat me.
I mean, Pionk is still...
into the corner.
Pionk's still one of those guys high that wants to push play and make the play, and he's very prone to turnovers. But I think
he's bought into the system.
Yeah, and I think the head coach, whose name is Paul Maurice, has really simplified his game, knowing that he doesn't have Dustin Byfuglien and Jacob Trouba and Ben Sherratt and Tyler Myers.
Yeah.
That really made that team scary. That was when that team should have won a Stanley Cup.
Probably, yeah. I would agree with that.
I think they should have beat the Vegas Golden Knights, and I think that team could have beat that Washington Capitals team for a Stanley Cup. But they were young, they got worn out, and the way they played, they were very heavy grinding hockey. That's tiring. That takes a toll on your team as much as it does on the other team. So coupled with the fact they were young, and then their window closed. They had to sign Patrick Laine, they had to sign Kyle Connor. The window closed on them. So I think they still get back there. I mean, they're still relatively young because they still Mark Scheifele's only 24. Patrick Laine is 21, 22. He's the same age as Connor McDavid.
Nikolai Ehlers is still young.
Yeah. So it's they'll still get there. But, I mean, like you said, this is a team that, the Edmonton Oilers struggle with having to grind it out with teams because they can't. They really can't. They don't have the depth. They don't want to send Connor McDavid out there against a matchup that's going to force him to play a heavy hockey because... Not to say Connor McDavid's weak or not strong or anything, but you don't want to tie up your best player who's scoring, 51% of your goals.
Because it's a waste.
Yeah, exactly. It's a wasted shift. Because then who are you going to send out there? You're going to send Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is a good hockey player. I'm a big fan of Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. He's had a tough season, but he's a very, very high-end number 2 center in the NHL. I really believe he's on any other team. He's a number 2 center, and if he wasn't playing behind Connor McDavid, he'd probably be a number 1, honestly. So there's nothing wrong with him, but the Edmonton Oilers are someone described it as a helicopter almost. They have the middle piece, but they have no wings. That's really it. They have down the middle, they're very solid. They're very good down there. Sam Gagner is good in his role. Jujhar Khaira can play really well in his role, but they have no wings. The only winger they have,
Draisaitl,
and that's it.
And James Neal has done what we all thought he was going to do and has cooled off.
I mean, and
he's been moved up and down the lineup. The line blender's been out in Edmonton.
Have you not driven Jesse Puljujarvi out of town? In theory, you could have Jesse Puljujarvi playing up there, and again, that is still one of the strangest decisions ever in the league because there's no better opportunity for him than in Edmonton. But I mean, that's whatever. He's out. He won't come back. He's not coming back to the NHL at all this season. He said he wants to spend the rest of the season in Finland.
Well, he can't. They passed the deadline.
Yeah.
So anybody that went back over there overseas to Europe or Russia cannot come back.
Oh,
so
right.
they're stuck there.
It was December 1st, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was like signing. It was like signing restricted free agents, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, that is what it is. I mean, I know we were originally talking about Montreal, but like it's just like we can talk about like other teams in the league. I mean,
But
Montreal's got a similar issue.
it does translate well because Montreal has been linked to the player in the team that we're going to talk about next. The big boy in the room, Taylor Hall, and the New Jersey Devils.
Oh, the elephant in the room.
So let's talk about New Jersey, okay? I want to point something out. This is a team that coming into the year, we all said, okay, look, yes, you got PK Subban, great. The defense is still fairly questionable. We know that they're going to be shaky, and we absolutely knew, this is not a surprise, that the goaltending is bad. Everybody and their mother knew Schneider's made of glass. I don't see him coming back. Blackwood's good, but he's very young. He's 22. He's not ready to start 60 games.
And then Louis Domingue was your third stringer, and Louis Domingue is a good backup. He's been very good for teams. Like he was good from Tampa Bay last year. But let's not beat around the
awful.
But let's not beat around the bush. Like Louis Domingue's not a guy you're going to throw in for 35
No.
games to play alongside of Blackwood. He just isn't.
But the caveat to that whole thing, and the reason that a lot of people were saying this could be a competitive team, is the goal scoring. Taylor Hall, Nico Hischier, Wayne Simmons, Jack Hughes, Subban brings that
Kyle
offensive
Palmieri.
game. Kyle Palmieri.
Even like Travis...
Nikita Gusev, everyone was really high on.
Even Travis... They were expecting Travis Zajac and Pavel Zacha to chip in here and there, and they just haven't.
2.52 goals for. They're 27th in the league. 28th on the power play at 14%. 9-15-5. They are the second worst team in the National Hockey League.
And the only team worse than them is the LA Kings, who everybody knew was going to be bad.
Actually, the Red Wings are the worst team.
Oh, that's right. The Red Wings have only won 5 games.
But here's the thing. We thought they were going to score goals, and they're not even doing that right now. Your leading goal scorer is Kyle Palmieri with 11. That's respectable. Your second leading goal scorer is Blake Coleman
with 9.
When your second guy in goals is Blake Coleman on a roster that has Taylor Hall, Nico Hischier, Travis Zajac,
even
something
Jesper Bratt
is very, very wrong. The team's not even scoring goals, and that's what they were built to do. And look, Jack Hughes having growing pains. He's only got 12 points in 26 games. Totally respect that. You know, guys are going to have growing pains. Not everybody comes into the league and scores a hat trick on their first game.
Not everyone's Austin
Matthews. Or
right.
even a guy like Derek Stepan scores a hat trick in his first game. Not everybody does that. In fact, most guys rookie season,
Well, that's not to like Jack Hughes has been a contributing member of this team. I mean, like 12 points in 26 games is respectable for a rookie. I mean, he's playing in a top 6 position.
He's not a bum, but he's not lighting the league on fire.
No, he's not having a Connor McDavid rookie season, which is fine because to be fair, Capo Caco isn't either, and he was drafted with him. So I mean,
but here's the thing. I mean, you know, John Hines gets fired. And I want to ask you something. I want to ask you 2 questions here. Let's start with this. Do you think this was a necessary move in firing John Hines?
I think so. I mean, I don't know if it's going to change anything because this roster is struggling no matter what, it seems like. And I was always very high on John Hines. I thought he was a really good coach. I mean, I always thought he did what he could. I mean, if you look at it since he started his career at the Devils, every year they've gotten progressively better, even if it's only by like a couple points here and there, like a couple more wins. That's still important because the team's improving, you know what I mean? But for some reason it just wasn't connecting anymore. And I don't know if it's the I don't want to sound like it, but I don't know if it's because Taylor Hall checked out, and once Taylor Hall checked out, the rest of the team kind of checked out, because when your big gun isn't your big gun, then like what are you gonna do? So that's really what it comes down to. And everybody the Devils' cornerstone has been their young defense, which everyone's really high on. They've got like Ty Smith, Damon Severson's in there.
Not Jesper Bratt. Will Butcher.
Will Butcher's in there. Then you add Sami Vatanen, who's a good puck-moving defenseman, who's also very responsible. And then you add PK Subban to that, who, you know, for a lot of years has been one of the elite defensemen in the NHL, like top 5 defensemen in the NHL, and he's looked terrible. He's looked out of place. He looked uncomfortable. I mean, the whole team pretty much has looked uncomfortable, but like PK Subban specifically hasn't looked good since they acquired him.
I hate plus minus. I do, because it's not a stat you can judge individual players on at all. And to be fair to Subban, he's playing a ton of minutes on his team because he is the guy. But he's currently sitting at a negative 15, which is the worst on the team. And again, I know you don't use plus minus to judge individual players, But it's hard to look past that. It's hard to look past a guy who's negative 15 on a team where, yeah, they're hemorrhaging goals, but it seems like they're hemorrhaging a lot of goals, specifically when he's on the ice.
Right.
And the second question to follow up that I wanted to ask you about John Hines, which you made a good point. This has been brought up, which might hurt Taylor Hall's value. Do you think Taylor Hall is a coach killer?
Taylor Hall is a coach killer. I mean, this is the conversation we were having about Jack Eichel. I mean, right, a couple of years ago, because they've been through how many coaches in Buffalo?
Like
Jack,
3, I think, since he started.
Is Jack Eichel a coach killer? And it's, I don't know. I don't know if it's Taylor Hall being a coach killer. I just think Taylor Hall has a lot of bad luck in the teams he gets traded to. I mean, he's just drafted by the Edmonton Oilers in the middle of their, like, limbo period. Gets traded to the Devils, and the Devils weren't very good, and then they expect them to be good, and they don't live up to expectations. I mean, I also want to say something about John Hines. John Hines, I think, is a good coach, and I think he will get hired somewhere else in the NHL. I think he's a good NHL coach because the rosters he's been given since he started coaching in New Jersey have not been great.
No. They had 1 year where they made the playoffs.
And that was entirely on the strength of Taylor Hall scoring 95 points and becoming
40 goals.
Like, that was... And that's not saying John Hines... But John Hines has coached some pretty mediocre teams to some pretty respectable records. Almost 500 records. That's better than you can say for a lot of guys. So I think he'll get another shot in the NHL. But is Taylor Hall... I don't know if he personally is a coach killer, but it seems wherever he goes, the team seems to struggle with him.
I'm going to say my argument is that he's a coach killer, but not by his own design. I think there's 2 reasons why you can classify Taylor Hall as a coach killer. One is the expectations around him. Because, I mean, let's be honest here. He's not had the stats throughout his entire career that a guy like him should.
I mean, for all the hype that warrants Taylor Hall, that Taylor Hall brings to the table, and like everyone's talking about how he's one of the best left wingers in the NHL, he's only scored more than 30 goals once in his NHL career. Other than that, he's been consistently a 20 to 25 goal scorer in his career.
Right. So that's part of the reason why I think a lot of that pressure gets put on a coach, because it's like, oh, Taylor Hall, you have Taylor Hall on your team, and he's not scoring goals.
Yeah, and you can't get enough out of Taylor Hall. And at what point do we just look at the player and say, well, maybe the hype around Taylor Hall isn't there? I mean,
maybe he's not a top 5 winger in the league.
He scored 40 goals once in his career. Like I said, he's been a 20 to 25 goal scorer in the league. He's been a 70-point guy for most, like 60 to 70-point guy most of his career.
Which is nothing wrong with that, but when the expectation is 40 goals, 100 points.
Yeah, when you're selected number 1 overall.
And the second reason why I think he might be a coach killer is just because, again, for some reason, the hype that follows him makes his trade value through the roof, which you're never, ever going to get a fair value for a guy like Taylor Hall for what his perceived value is. Right. It's like trading McDavid. You're never going to get fair value for him. You're going to have to take less than what you think you should. But the fact that they're asking for so much means that it's hard to move him. So where does that fall? On the coach. Why aren't you getting... I can't move him. I can't get rid of him for the value because the owner will have my head. You need to get more out of Taylor Hall.
And at some point, maybe it's just like I just think we need to look at it and say maybe he's not the player that we think he is. Because the hype around... He's 28 years old, right? He's in the... Perceivably, what is the prime of his career. Last year he gets injured, right? He's a point per game in his career point per game in the season going in last year before he gets that knee injury and doesn't, like... But, like, let's look at it this way. Like, he's only got 6 goals in 29 games this season. He's almost a point per game. He's 25 points in 29 games, but he's only scored 6 goals. That's not on pace for the 40 goals you expect out of him, or even the 100 points you're expecting him to push for.
I mean, okay, he has 25 points, but you're not paying Taylor Hall to be an assist guy.
I mean, like...
You're not paying Taylor Hall to get 60 assists.
He's only cracked 20... He's never cracked 30 goals except for once in his career, and other than that, he's only cracked 25 goals 3 times in his career. He's been a consistent 20 to 25 goal scorer in his career. He's been a 50 to 60 point guy. He had the 93 point season where he got the Devils into the playoffs. And other than that, the highest season he had was like his third or fourth season in the league, and he put up 80 points at the Edmonton Oilers. And so it's like, I think.
But for some reason, there's just this mystique around him where it's like he's top 5 left winger in the NHL, Taylor Hall.
But yet, like, we don't talk about a guy that's like, oh yeah, he's fast, he's dynamic, he's got great hands, he can do all these things. It's like, yeah, he's a flashy player, and I like Taylor Hall, and he's exciting to watch. But like, at what point do we just like accept the fact that he's not Patrick Kane or he's not Leon Draisaitl? Like, he's not to that level. Like. And there's nothing wrong with it. He's a top 6 winger in the NHL. Like, he's a top 6 winger on any team in this league.
Absolutely. He's
a 65 to 75 point guy, maybe high end 80, 85 points. Like, that's serviceable. But like, when do we stop talking about him as being like this game-breaking #1 left winger in the league when like he's being held to similar ilk of guys like Alexander Ovechkin and Leon Draisaitl and stuff like that. But like Ovechkin scored 60 goals in his career. Like,
well, it's funny. If I didn't tell you a player name and I just told you stats and I said 30 goals, 40 assists, 70 points, okay?
mm-hmm.
And I told you that player that got that was Matt Barzal, you'd be like, okay, that's about where he should be.
Yeah, it's
maybe a little bit
season.
more assists and goals or if I told you that player was Patrick Laine, okay, should he have a little bit more goals? That's fair. Mika Zibanejad, that's a great season for Mika Zibanejad.
Right.
Then if I tell you that player was McDavid, that's a horrible season
That's a down season
for Connor McDavid standards.
Yeah, if he played a full 82 games and came out with only 70 points, it's a bad season for him.
But then if I tell you that player is Taylor Hall, we shouldn't be saying that's a bad season, but we are. That should not be a bad Taylor Hall season, 30 and 40 and 70 points. But for some reason, there's this mystique around him that says, oh, he should be a 40-goal scorer.
But it's like he's only proved he can do it once, and he didn't even do it. He hit 39 goals. He didn't even hit the 40.
So it's like, I don't know where this hype is coming from. Other than, I guess, the eye test. I mean, people are saying, oh, he has the skill to be a 30, 40-goal scorer, but he's 28. Like, you should be doing that now. If we were having this conversation when he's 22, okay, you can give him a few years, but he's 28. You should be doing this right now.
I think the other thing with Taylor Hall is it's like, because he was drafted first overall, and because of the eye test, it's like, oh, well, he should be doing it. But instead of just having an honest look at it and being like, well, maybe he's just like a 70-point guy. Maybe that's all he is. And there's nothing wrong. Like, at that point, there'd be nothing wrong with that. And maybe he wouldn't be a coach killer. Because, like, let's be honest, he couldn't produce next to playing shotgun with McDavid. He rode shotgun with McDavid his first two seasons with McDavid, and he couldn't produce to the level they thought he could. He gets sent here. He has a couple years. And then he goes and has that 93-point season. And then last year he gets injured, right? He goes down with that knee injury, blows his knee up in January. And he'd played 33 games at that point, was 37 points, but only 11 goals.
Okay. So, again, he was only on pace, really, for a 30-goal season.
Right. And this season he's got 29. He's played 29 games, 25 points, but only 6 goals. Again, he's only on pace for like a 25 to 30-goal season. And that's...
Even less than that, which is crazy.
That's been his MO in his career.
Which, I mean, and that's the thing is, now we're talking about he's on the block. He's officially been put on the block. We've heard this from multiple sources.
And he's not going to sign with New Jersey.
And again, I talked about this last time. His agent has a habit of not signing during the season anyway.
Right.
So any team that's going to be taking him has to be willing to take that risk.
I think the difference is like you'd be more inclined to like hold on to him if you knew there was a real chance of you signing him at the end of this year, like Columbus and Panarin. Panarin had voiced opinion about going to July 1st, and he said he wanted to play in a bigger market like New York or wherever, but like Columbus still felt like they had a chance because they were still a competitive team. It wasn't like Columbus was bad. They got to the second round and got to Game 6 against the Boston Bruins, who just played for a Stanley Cup. Like they were a good team. New Jersey has no shot at this because Taylor Hall's 28. He wants to go to a competitive team. And let's be honest, New Jersey does not look like they're going to be competitive anytime soon with how bad they've been.
So I do want to get into some hypotheticals because these are always fun. These let's make a deal sort of situations here. He's minus 11.
I mean, like in his career, just to wrap it up, like Taylor Hall in his career has played 591 games. He's got 536 points. He's almost, which is respectable, but he's a minus 39 for his career. Which again, plus minus doesn't tell at all. But like he's been on some bad teams, but he's not like lighting it up like he is. Like McDavid's almost has over a point per game in his NHL career. Draisaitl has over a point. Ovechkin's over a point per game in his NHL career, and these are the guys for some reason that were holding Taylor Hall
in the same light as, yeah, which is
doesn't make any sense. He's more akin to, a guy like Ryan O'Reilly or even
a guy like David Krejci.
Right, like a good,
just minus the defense.
Yeah, like a good good second line player can play on the first line in a pinch, can get you your 70 points and your 30 goals, and that's fine. But for some reason, he's got this like pedigree that he really honestly hasn't earned in his career.
No.
And I'm not saying that to be negative towards Taylor Hall. It's just the truth. Like he hasn't earned the pedigree that he has.
No.
The hype that comes with him for some reason doesn't.
If this tells you anything, Anthony Beauvillier, who I love, don't get me wrong, I'm not hating on Beauvillier, but Anthony Beauvillier has more goals right now than Taylor Hall.
And Anthony Beauvillier is like career top of his career as like a middle six winger, like second, third
Josh
line winger.
Bailey and Derek Brassard have more goals than him.
Yeah. So,
but I do want to get into hypotheticals. But before we do this, let's play GM mode here. I do want to ask you one question. If you're the GM, who's it, Ray Shero?
yeah.
If you're Ray Shero, are you moving Taylor Hall ASAP, or are you waiting until the trade deadline?
I think with Taylor Hall, I want to wait and give it a wait a little bit to see if he can drive his value back up. But I mean, like, his value is always going to be high because it's Taylor Hall. Like we said, like the mystique around Taylor Hall for some reason makes it so his value is always incredibly high. But I think you should try to move him as quickly as possible because I think you need to get rid of the media sensation that is the Taylor Hall debacle. Will he stay? Will he go? You know, who are they going to get for him? Can they get anything for him? What's the value? I think you have to get rid of him now just because it'll make it easier for the rest of the team. And it'll make it easier for guys like Jack Hughes and, you know, PK Subban. It'll be easier for the team to then gel as a team because they're not worried about, like, well, this guy's not going to be here anyway. And let's be honest, like, if Taylor Hall is checked out, the rest of the locker room knows. So you want to get rid of that problem as soon as possible.
I agree. I do think they should move him as soon as possible. And I think there's two reasons why they should move him as soon as possible. I think, one, they should move him because you don't know if he's mentally checked out, his value will only decrease by the trade deadline. Let's say come trade deadline, you know, usually teams have between 20 to 25 games left to play.
Right.
Come trade deadline, if teams have hit their 60 game mark and Taylor Hall's sitting at 15 goals, you're essentially trading for a 20 goal scorer, right?
Yeah.
So I think his value can only go down. And also, I think trading him now lets you ask for a little bit more, maybe squeak out a little bit of a higher draft pick, specifically because the team will have more time to talk to his agent and more time to try to get a deal done.
And to gauge where he's standing, yeah.
So I think those are two factors that would lead me to trade him as soon as possible. Plus what you said, get him off the team. You don't want this mass
fester.
just to
Well, I mean,
drag down. He's like an anchor on a boat right now.
it's like the Rangers in the last couple of years. Like that was a big distraction for the team, was going to the trade deadline. You knew most of the team was going to be gutted, so carrying these players really didn't matter. Like Kevin Hayes and Ryan McDonough and things like that, and then like carrying it to the deadline really was an anchor, like it was a millstone around the team's neck.
Well, that's what they're dealing with now with Chris Kreider.
But I think it's a little bit different, and then like the Rangers will probably end up trading Kreider sooner rather than later.
I think also just because there's no expectation on the team this year.
Yeah, they're expected to be competitive, but they're not expected to make the playoffs, so it's a little different. And the season hasn't been as hard. Like those are some rough seasons. The teams are not good. They didn't look competitive most nights. At least this team's young. It's fast. It's competitive. They're fun to watch. Anyway,
So, do you have? Because when I flip the screen, I mean, you guys aren't going to see this, but I have a sheet with some hypothetical trades. Do you have any hypotheticals that you want to give to me? And I would be acting as the other team's GM because that's what I want to do. I'm going to give you the trade and you're whatever other team's GM.
I mean, I don't have anything specific because like I was looking at rosters and like I just couldn't figure out what fair value for Taylor Hall was because I don't know, like I don't understand what the teams are looking for out of him. So it's like Colorado's been one, right? And like people were linking him to Colorado for some reason. Like he would make Colorado less of a glass cannon. They'd have a like depth scoring up there. But it's like, what do you ask for in return? You're not going to get Samuel Girard. You're definitely not getting Cale Makar.
No.
So it's like, what do you get? Like Nikita Zadorov, like a draft pick, like. And the other thing is, like, what do the Devils want? Do the Devils want a young roster player to replace him, or are they looking for draft picks to keep building? Because let's be honest, the Devils, the indication the Devils are making to the league this year in the offseason was they were looking to be competitive this year, going forward.
Well, look at their UFAs. Taylor Hall is up. Wayne Simmons is up. Andy Green, he's probably going to retire. But Sammy Vatanen's also up. So you have a good middle six utility guy in Wayne Simmons who's coming up, and a reasonably okay top four defenseman coming up. Do you think they're going to sign on a team that's as bad as this one?
I mean, Wayne Simmons is at the point in his career where he pretty much will take probably whatever contracts are thrown his way because teams aren't exactly like the league's not trending in his favor anymore because he's a little slow, like he's a little like flat-footed and not as fast as he used to be. And he's not as dominant as he was in his prime in Philly where he was scoring 30 to 35 goals those years. I mean, Sammy Vatanen probably has some value on the market. I mean, there are teams that are willing to trade, like probably willing to sign him. I mean, we saw it with Jake Gardner. I mean, there was some question marks about guys like that. Jake Gardner took a while to sign, but I mean, at the end of the day, Vatanen's a decent, 30 to 40 point guy on the back end on good teams.
He's the kind of guy that you're not going to be excited about signing, but you need a player like him.
Yeah, I mean, and on a good team you can shelter him in a bottom, a 4-5 role where he's not playing matchup minutes, and you put him on the power play and things like that. So you can shelter him a little more. Whereas on the Devils, he's playing like big minutes in their top 4 with matchups, and that's not exactly what he's meant to do.
Okay, so let's switch seats because I'm gonna be GMing this for a little bit, and I'm gonna reveal to you one by one the trades that I have, and I want you to be. We're gonna play some be a GM mode here, and if you guys want to drop in the comments what you think you would be trading, and I did try to work out all these trades so that they did work in terms of cap. So the first trade I have, I'm coming to you. I'm saying, hey. And I went into this with the mindset of the Devils should probably be trying to trade for a goalie between 25 to 30 and a forward that's not going to replace Taylor Hall, but he's going to be another forward to put in the lineup.
Okay.
So I'm coming to you. You're Arizona. I'm saying, hey, you got 2 goalies that should probably both be starting. I want Antti Raanta, Vinny Hinostroza, and a 3rd-round pick for Taylor Hall.
I mean, I think that's a fair trade. I'd be willing to take it, just because, like you said, I'm probably at this point looking to move Antti Raanta, because I'm not going to move Darcy Kemper. He's been playing way too well. I mean, he's earned his keep here. And Vinny Hinostroza, while he's a good piece, isn't exactly going to break the bank on us because we have guys of similar ilk here playing in our top 6, top 9.
I did make sure all these were cap-wise, too, so that no team's going to be hurting for cap.
And I mean, and adding Taylor Hall to a lineup that has, Clayton Keller,
Phil Kessel,
Derek Stepan. I mean, Nick Schmaltz is out there. It would make the Coyotes a much more fearsome team in the Pacific Division, because then it would give them the firepower. Because again, I'm not saying that Taylor Hall would add a 30-goal scorer to a lineup, like potentially, which doesn't have very many of them, and he also adds a lot of speed to the lineup through their middle. Like, he adds a lot of elements that they don't have, which is why a team like Arizona would probably covet a guy like that more so than other teams. So I think it really does, I think it's a good trade for them because, again, it makes them more dangerous in their Pacific Division, because a lot of the teams that they'd be playing against in the Pacific Division aren't exactly elite scoring teams. Like, Vegas doesn't have an elite scorer. They have Mark Stone, and Mark Stone's a great hockey player. He's an 85-point guy, but like he's not like Taylor Hall.
But they have a bunch of 30 goal scorers. They have guys like Pacioretty, Mark Stone. I don't think William Karlsson's going to hit 40 again in his career. He'll probably be 30 goals, which is perfect for him. But they don't really have that, Vladimir Tarasenko or Steven Stamkos.
Right, even Steven Stamkos is having a rough year this year. He's only got, 8 goals, but, whatever. I mean, and, they'd be playing... I mean, even if they play the Oilers, it adds an element to them that makes them a little more dangerous than the Oilers because it adds the depth to the lineup.
And they can try to keep up speed-wise.
Right. And then... say they play Vancouver, it makes them a little more dangerous against Vancouver. I mean, Vancouver's a little more rounded of a lineup than the other 2 teams in that division. I think Vancouver's a better, general hockey team that's just going through some growing pains. I think, through the lineup, they're a little better than these other teams. But I just think, Arizona, this is a trade that, Arizona should take, and if they didn't, I'd be very surprised. Because, again, you're already looking to move that goaltender. So you kind of have to, because you have a log jam there. Because, Antti Raanta is proving to be a number 1, and there's no reason to force him into a backup role.
And you're not trading Darcy Kemper right now.
No, of course.
So you have to move one of them, and It's Antti Raanta.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's fair. And like I said, Vinny Hinostroza is not a forward that's going to break the bank on them. You'd be replacing Vinny Hinostroza in your top 6 with Taylor Hall. So I think it automatically makes you a little more dangerous. And that top power play unit becomes a little more dangerous because if you think about it, now you have Phil Kessel, Derek Stepan, Clayton Keller, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, and Taylor Hall all in one unit. That's a potent number 1 unit, and that really elevates them from an above-average NHL team to, honestly, probably an elite scoring team because that power play can break games wide open for them. That's a team you're not going to want to take a lot of penalties against because you don't want to put guys like that all on the ice at once.
No.
Because they could open that game wide open on you. So I think that's really, there's a lot of elements here that, work in favor. And this was, when I was looking at it, this was the team that made the most sense to me, too, was Arizona being the ideal trade partner. He's out of the division. He's out of the conference. You see him twice a year after that.
You won't see him in the playoffs unless you both make the Stanley Cup Finals.
Right, exactly. And that's even, at this point, a long shot for both teams. So I think it's a really fair trade.
And if any of these scenarios, if you want to bounce back and hit me with a counter offer,
yeah, right,
go for it. But so I really like that one. You pretty much summed it up. I thought this made the most sense. They have a goalie. New Jersey needs a goalie.
And Antti Raanta then gives Blackwood somebody to play behind, whereas Blackwood can then develop more properly than just throwing him to the wolves every night.
Being play in the hardest division in hockey.
And get shelled every single night because our team isn't good.
So, number 2, we're going to Montreal. They need a scoring winger. I want Philip Deneau. I thought about Yoel Amia, but I don't think they're going to trade him based on his trade value right now. Philip Deneau, the goalies Caden Primo, and a third.
I mean, Caden Primo is an interesting one just because, like, you don't really know what you're getting here with him because
He's a little younger than the goalie that New Jersey would probably be looking for.
he's like 20 years old, I think. But even then, like, he had no expectations coming out of getting drafted and things like that. People really weren't expecting much out of him. But he absolutely lit the AHL on fire and has been amazing for their farm team. He looked good in his NHL debut. It wasn't really his fault they lost the game. They went down 2-0 early, and then I really didn't pay attention after that. Philip Deneau is an interesting one, too, because, like, again, you're not replacing Taylor Hall's scoring with Philip Deneau, but Philip Deneau does add, like, a rounded piece to that Devils lineup, and it adds another pretty solid 200-foot player to a roster that really doesn't have a lot of them. I mean, it would add another, like, it's essentially like adding Travis Zajac to the lineup, but like Travis Zajac in his prime.
Right.
You know, a 50-point guy, but who can play penalty kill. You can put him on your second power play unit.
You can trust him in his own end.
Right. And you can expect him, you can put him out there in the last minute of a game if you really have to. And, it doesn't add, like, he's not going to add, like, a number 1 power play guy, but, like, you can play him on your second power play unit and expect, like, 20 goals out of him.
Just send him to the net.
Yeah, exactly. And Montreal's, apparently they're scoring goals this year, but, like, we really weren't expecting them to score that many goals. And I think Taylor Hall's, like, Montreal's been looking for that scoring winger and that game-breaking forward for a long time.
Well, that's why they offer sheeted Sebastian Aho.
Right.
Like, clearly you're not going to... Let's be honest here. You put it in a really good way when you were explaining this to me. You said you have to work in this league. You don't want to piss off the other GMs because you have to work with them.
Right.
So you're not offer sheeting unless you desperately have a need that you need to fill that you don't think you can get anywhere else. So clearly Montreal management thinks, like, we need some scoring. And
franchise players don't come up on... You draft franchise players. They generally don't get traded for, and you generally don't sign them. I mean, Artemi Panarin and Sergei Bobrovsky are the last franchise, and John Tavares maybe, like the last franchise players I remember going to free agency and signing on a team that wasn't their original team. I mean, like Steven Stamkos took it to the deadline and then signed at 11:59:59 on June 31st or June 30th to stay with Tampa Bay when everyone's like, he's going home, he's going to Toronto. And I thought so too because he really didn't look like he wanted to stay in Tampa Bay. It was before Tampa Bay became like an elite NHL team. But I mean, so this adds, like, this fills that, like, when Taylor Hall comes on the market, this is like a win-win because it fills that hole. And it realistically, again, you move him out of division, so you only see him like 2 or 3 times a year. But I mean, I'd take it just because it fills a need as New Jersey and like as Montreal, and as New Jersey, it also fills like some needs. And at the end of the day, like, you can move Philip Deneau again at the deadline for another pick. Like, you can raise his value and then trade him again at the deadline, assuming we're making this trade now in December and not in February at the deadline. Yeah, I went with this one just because it's a younger goalie, and really I think New Jersey should be looking for an established guy, but I mean, Montreal's clearly had some backup issues of their own. I mean, they're not going to trade for Keith Kincaid again.
Yeah. But I thought I went into this like Montreal needs some scoring wingers. And Taylor Hall, again, we just talked about Taylor Hall not being that elite guy for like 20 minutes. But at the end of the day, he's a serviceable 25 to 30 goal scorer. Which, again, Montreal doesn't really have a lot of guys that can drive offense on their own. And when Taylor Hall is mentally engaged, you can see that he can drive offense on his own.
Right.
It's when he's checked out that's an issue. So you really have to, and I think Claude Julien is a good enough coach to keep his head in the game.
Well, it's also the difference is the situation would be different. He'd be going to Montreal, which is, has a media market that's way more engaged, and the team itself is more competitive than the Devils are. And adding
in a weaker division.
And adding Taylor Hall makes that team way more competitive, and it lets them match up a little better against the teams in the division. I mean, again, they become a little bit more of a glass cannon, which is a phrase he keeps using, because Taylor Hall becomes all their firepower up front. And again, it's not going to, but you had him. You also have young guys like Nick Suzuki playing there, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, and then you add Taylor Hall into the mix with him, and then Brendan Gallagher. I mean, there are pieces there that could be a really high-end, there could be some scoring there that we weren't expecting out of them. So, that's good, and I'd be willing to take that on.
So, the next one, the tale of two trouble players. Johnny Gaudreau, Taylor Hall, 1 for 1.
I mean, the value's there for both of them, right? I mean, like the 1-for-1 trade's really all that makes sense here because you're not going to get anything else out of them because
You're not trading away David Riddick, and you're not trading away Cam Talbot that you just signed.
Right. And let's be honest, like Taylor Hall is underperforming this year. Johnny Gaudreau is underperforming this year. Calgary's looking for a change. Johnny Gaudreau might be looking for a change, and Johnny Gaudreau's from New Jersey. He'd be coming home. Home. He's from South Jersey. I'm pretty sure he grew up a Flyer fan, but like, this would still be coming home for him. And I mean, he's a similar player to Taylor Hall. He's probably faster, a little more dynamic. He's smaller.
He's under contract for a longer term, so you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, he's one more year. He's another year on his contract after this, so you have time to negotiate with his agent and make sure you can get the extension signed next year.
To me, this was all about change of scenery.
Yeah,
these are two guys that clearly we're seeing a less effective Johnny Gaudreau. He's not going to the middle of the ice anymore. He looks a little bit more afraid, like more of a perimeter guy. So maybe you move him, you move Taylor Hall, two trouble guys, you get them re-engaged, and you see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, it works for both players because then you ostensibly are replacing Taylor Hall's goal scoring with Johnny Gaudreau's because Johnny Gaudreau has shown in the past he could be like an 80 to 90 point guy, and Taylor Hall, under the assumption that we've been operating under for all these years, is an 80 to 90 point guy, even though he's shown in his career his track record doesn't prove that, but his mystique and like his whatever has leads to believe he could be like a 90 point guy. So like it really is just a 1-for-1 straight up change of scenery. Like, I'm trading you my elite left winger for your elite left winger, and we're going to see if we can get more out of them here than we did there. And I don't know if Calgary would go for it, but I mean, I don't see anything necessarily wrong with the trade. I mean, the value is straight up. I mean, they both have similar goals. Like, I think they both have like 6 or 7 goals in the season. They're both sitting around like 25 to 30 points. Like, so, I mean, and Taylor Hall adds a lot to Calgary that Johnny Gaudreau, like, I mean, it adds some size. He's a little bigger, and he's bigger than Johnny Gaudreau. Like, that's not saying much. Johnny Gaudreau's like 5'6". But I mean, it adds some size to a team that's plays in the Western Conference, is a little heavier. They play a little bit of heavier hockey, and I mean, Sean Monahan and Johnny Gaudreau have had great chemistry since they've been there together. But this year it just looks off, and maybe adding Taylor Hall would make that chemistry a little different because it had to bring a different element to the game that Johnny Gaudreau doesn't have. Like, Johnny Gaudreau likes stick handle and stuff, whereas Taylor Hall can beat you flat out with speed and strength. Like, he's a bigger guy. So it might add a little more element that, might be a little more useful to a guy like Sean Monahan than Johnny Gaudreau, who, despite being an elite player in the NHL, isn't exactly the strongest or fastest guy in the league and has a tendency to get manhandled when he's not engaged. He's a tendency to stay to the perimeter and get absolutely pushed around by bigger guys.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the reason I put this one up is just, I think this is all head games with these two players. I don't think Hall wants to be in New Jersey anymore. And I don't know what the deal with Johnny Gaudreau is. Maybe it was the whole Bill Peters situation, or maybe he's just better off in the Eastern Conference where it's a little bit more skill, a little bit more speed than it is in the Western Conference. So I think that's, again, I think this is an unrealistic trade just because I don't think Calgary wants to get rid of Johnny Gaudreau.
No.
But I think on paper, this is a hockey trade that could work.
Yeah, I agree.
So the next one I have is... This one would have to be some retained salary to work. We're talking Taylor Hall to the Florida Panthers. New Jersey gets Spencer Knight, Vincent Trocheck, and a 6th. And Florida gets Taylor Hall, and they have to retain some money. Or New Jersey retains $2 million of Taylor Hall's contract to make this work.
See, the sticking point for me is the Vinny Trocheck piece. I don't know if Florida wants to give up Vinny Trocheck because there's a lot of depth down the middle already there with Barkov, and then Trocheck's number 2.
That's the thing is Trocheck being in the middle.
Like, adding Taylor Hall would make that team a lot more dangerous, but losing that number 2 center without having a replacement really is the issue because, like, that'd be the sticking point for me. And I'd rather trade somebody like maybe like Mike Hoffman instead of Taylor Hall because Hoffman's a winger and we're replacing a winger for a winger. And like, even if like Hoffman is having a good year out there, he had a good year last year with them. I mean, even like adding a guy like Dadonov who had a quiet 70-point season, I'd rather trade for Taylor Hall than Vinny Trocheck. And that's just based on the position he plays. Like, it has nothing to do with Vinny Trocheck as a player. Like, I don't think Vinny Trocheck's exceptional or anything. Like, I think Vinny Trocheck is a good number 2 center, but I just don't like. You're not saying like, but he's not an elite player, and it has something to do with that. It's more just like the position he plays is so integral. And this team's already lacking in depth in other areas that I would rather not put a bullet hole right in the middle, which is where your issue kind of is.
Yeah, so the reason that I put this trade up here is I think this is a trade that New Jersey would want more than anything.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I don't think this is a trade that the Florida Panthers are necessarily looking for, because I don't think scoring is the issue in Florida right now. But I think this is a perfect trade for the Devils, just specifically because you get that young goalie, you get that Spencer Knight, and you're getting him away from a team before they have time to develop an attachment to him, because he just got drafted now.
Yeah, or that he develops in their system where he gets used to the way they're doing things.
Right. And I'm going to be honest here. If I was a Florida GM, I'm probably saying no to this.
Yeah, I would probably reject this too.
But this is a trade that I put up here specifically just because this is like a good trade for the Devils specifically. They get that young goalie. They get Spencer Knight. You don't have to worry about drafting a goalie because now you have him in your system. You can tank out the next couple of years, let Spencer Knight develop. You don't got to worry about Taylor Hall.
I mean, the Spencer Knight's not really the sticking point here because like they just signed Sergei Bobrovsky for what, like 10 years.
That's part of the reason why I put this up here, because I think Spencer Knight was going to be the answer until you signed Sergei Bobrovsky.
Right, and Sergei Bobrovsky. I mean, even signing Sergei Bobrovsky, like he's what, was he 29 or 30 when he signed? 29, I think, when he signed with them. So I mean, like 10 years. I mean, it's still rough. I mean, I think they still want Spencer Knight in the system, like that. But like that, then.
But will he get log jammed? Is the question.
Probably, that's the issue. Is like if he comes at like, it's. I think Vancouver went about their goaltending situation in a really good way, whereas like Jacob Markstrom's probably gonna hit the market at the end of this year, and Thatcher Demko had all that time to develop and is now ready to play, and you can tell he's ready to play. So like that would be that if they do something like that, it'll be fine. But like the length of that contract for Sergei Bobrovsky is really what's gonna handcuff them, and the value on it. I mean, $10 million a year, $10.5 million a year, is gonna be hard to move when Sergei Bobrovsky's like 38 and not exactly the player he is now.
Yeah, it was a 7-year contract, like. You know,
so
you're locked into this guy.
Yeah, so log jamming Spencer Knight is a real issue here, and I honestly imagine you see them trade Spencer Knight rather than.
Well, you're gonna have a $7 million backup.
Yeah, I mean you just can't, especially on a team that you're looking to maintain stay competitive with, prior to the end of that contract. Because like let's be honest, Barkov's what, like 22, 23.
So these guys are starting to hit their physical primes.
Right, and like in theory, he could be competitive. He'll be elite for the next like 8 to 9 years through his early 30s. And even like so, I think this is one I'd say no to. But I understand like
I would as well.
I can see the hockey, like the thought process behind Ray Shero coming to them being like, hey, I want these pieces. I think honestly, had it instead of Vinny Trocheck, had it been like a winger, I think Florida might give more consideration to it. Like if they're like, hey, we'll give us Mike Hoffman for Taylor Hall. It's like, okay, yeah.
Trading the winger for the winger.
Yeah, because like I said, like it just adds. It's just a big hole in the lineup that they can't really fill because they don't have Nick Bjugstad anymore.
Right.
So I think that's really the issue.
I don't remember if I have one or two more. Okay, I have one more. So this is a divisional trade, so it's probably not going to happen ever. But this to me is. Let's swap our problem players, and I'll give you a little bit of extra sauce on the side.
Yeah.
To the Islanders would be Taylor Hall, and to the New Jersey Devils would be Josh Hosang, Scott Mayfield, Michael Dal-Cole, and a third. I didn't include Jordan Eberle in this trade because if I was the GM of the Islanders, I would be trading Jordan Eberle. The problem is, for some reason, and this really confused me, we gave him a no-trade clause. I don't know why. And it was really weird to me that a GM as smart and as shrewd as Lou Lamoriello got suckered in by the playoff performance that Jordan Eberle had. Don't get me wrong, as an Islander fan, I loved watching Jordan Eberle tear the Pittsburgh Penguins apart. That made my whole month, basically. I didn't even feel that bad about losing in the next round. But Jordan Eberle in the regular season was mediocre. And right now he's mediocre.
He's having a slow start, yeah.
And it was very confusing to me that a GM that's been around as long as Lou Lamoriello has been got suckered in by that playoff performance, gave him a no-trade clause. So that's why I didn't include him in here, because I don't think Eberle would waive his no-trade clause to go to New Jersey.
Right.
If I could trade Eberle, I would. And I didn't include Brock Nelson because he's that second-line center. But I'm going to give you a young player who's shown that he has a lot of talent, but for some reason, Trotz and Lamoriello just don't trust him. And he said he doesn't want to be here anymore. I'm going to give you a 27-year-old, heavy, hard-hitting defenseman. Michael Dal-Cole's kind of a bottom six cog piece, and I'm going to throw a third-round pick at you.
I mean, I think this trade works. I mean, this is more so like this solves a lot of problems for the Islanders more than it does the Devils. I mean, it solves the Islanders not having that elite goal scorer that they've been looking for years. I mean, it adds, like, you can now slide him onto a top line with Anders Lee and Matt Barzal. And now you have a top line of Taylor Hall, Matt Barzal, and Anders Lee. And that's a scary first line because it's a lot of speed coming at you, and they're all, relatively pretty big guys. I don't think I would take it necessarily if I'm New Jersey, just because I don't know if, like, Josh Ho-Sang's been kind of a problem for the Islanders. He's shown to be kind of a problem piece. And, like, I don't know if I'm trading Taylor Hall to solve your problems. Do you know what I'm saying?
It's also in the division. You're going to see him 6 times a year.
I mean, Scott Mayfield helps, because especially if you lose Sammy Vatanen to the free agency, it adds a little more, like a more of a veteran presence and a little more, like, solid.
He has some snarl to his game.
Yeah, he's a little
body.
more staunch in his own end. And, like, Michael Del Cole, drafted very high, just hasn't shown that he can play at that level at the NHL. He's just too slow. He doesn't skate as well as everybody thought he was going to. I mean, that's not to say anything. Like, everyone says that John Tavares in the Canadiens League wasn't a great skater. And I mean, he wasn't. John Tavares wasn't exactly a great skater, but, like, he wasn't slow. The issue was, like, John Tavares just wasn't a good skater.
Right.
Michael Del Cole isn't a good skater, and he looks slow. He looks like he's skating in cement sometimes.
Yeah.
Which is the issue. And I mean, like, he can have all the talent up front he wants, but this isn't, like, let's be real, it's not 1989 anymore. Like, Brett Hull couldn't skate for shit. But Brett Hull didn't have to because the league wasn't exactly that fast back then. Now it's like, I'm not comparing Michael Del Cole to Brett Hull. I'm just saying, like, the skating ability is pretty much on par with Brett Hull.
But the league has passed that by.
Right, exactly. Like, you can't just be taking clappers from the blue line and scoring on guys anymore. Like, it doesn't work.
So ultimately, I would agree with you. I don't think I would take this if I'm New Jersey. And what kind of really pains me to say is that if the Islanders really want that first line elite scoring winger, it's probably going to cost us. At this point, we can't trade Eberle. I would rather not trade Brock Nelson just because he plays center, and
Right.
we really don't have a second line center outside of him, because I want to keep Bailey on the wing, and I want to keep Anders Lee on the wing. It's ultimately probably going to cost us one of Noah Dobson or Beauvillier. And I hate saying that we might have to trade away Beauvillier because he's 22. He's a great spark plug guy. He's high energy. He gives us 110% every single night. But it's probably going to cost us him to get, especially to a team that's looking to rebuild.
Yeah.
It's probably going to end up costing us him, and I hate saying that. And Noah Dobson, I hate would to have traded him away when I don't really like the way he's being used right now because he's been scratched like pretty much every game this season. He's only played like 4 or 5, so I don't even know why he's up here right now. But yeah, I mean, that's tough. I wouldn't take this trade to New Jersey. I would be willing to take a flyer on Ho-Sang because I do think, given what I've seen of him from his years in the Islanders, I do think he can be a 20 to 25 goals. He to me, he's like a Carl Hagelin in his prime. Super fast, good with the puck, good on his skates, 20 to 25 goals, put him on the penalty kill.
Yeah. My other thing is, like, this doesn't answer the question New Jersey for the goaltending, and then, like,
That's the other problem.
you have Thomas Greiss, but Greiss is only under contract for so long.
Here's the thing. His contract is up next year, and I hate to say this, but am I willing to say that I can feel comfortable giving Varlamov the next 40 starts and make the playoffs? He's been so inconsistent this year, and Thomas Greiss has been otherworldly. Do I really trust trading away Thomas Greiss and not having that guy in the back end?
Yeah, and I think the other issue is, like, Ilya Sorokin is supposedly coming over next year when his contract with the KHL runs out. So it does create a vacancy, but, like, do you really want to, like, move Greiss with the year left on his contract and, like you said, give Varlamov those 40 starts and then immediately throw Sorokin into a backup role when he hasn't had any chance to adjust to the North American game? Where you'd rather give him some time in the AHL,
like what the Rangers are doing now, which is
yeah,
striking.
right, exactly. So then, like, he gets comfortable, he can go down there and dominate, and then you move Thomas Greiss because then you have a spot to move him, and he can play in a North American rink instead of just being like, yo, Ilya, get out there, kid, go get him,
Right.
Which, I mean, like, hey, he can come right over and be an absolute animal, but, like, generally you don't want to do that, especially with goaltenders specifically, because it could really be damaging to your overall development.
Specifically with a guy that we've been waiting for 6 years for.
Right. The same thing with the Rangers and Shesterkin. Like, they drafted him in 2014 or whatever.
You don't want to put all that time into it just to ruin him.
Right. So,
I do want to hit you with one more. I don't have a trade for this, but the team seems to work out would you be willing to trade with the New York Rangers and Alexander Georgiev?
See,
Because here's the thing.
Alexander Georgiev's been out of this world this season.
Here's the thing. If Lundqvist's contract was 1 year shorter, keep Georgiev. Perfect. Fine. He's under contract until the end of next year. Shesterkin's been killing it in the AHL. Now here's the question. What do? Do you leave him in the AHL for another year and maybe stunt his growth? You can't have 3 goalies and do a 3-goalie rotation. Are you putting Henrik Lundqvist on the back burner? Like what?
And you can't trade Henrik Lundqvist because his $8.5 million contract.
And I'm pretty sure he has an NTC anyway.
Yeah, I mean, and to be honest, it's Henrik Lundqvist is Mr. New York Ranger. Like, you can't trade him. He has to retire a New York Ranger.
So, New York Ranger fan, GM your way out of this.
I mean, I think, like, there are a lot of ideal trading partners here, right? Because there are teams looking for backups. I mean, but Georgiev's proved it. He's not a backup. He can play 50 to 60 games. Like, Toronto could be a potential trade partner, right? Because they're looking for backups. You can trade Georgiev up there and get, like, William Nylander out of them, maybe, because they're in a cap crunch, and we can take on a young winger. But do you want to log jam Alexander Georgiev behind Frederik Andersen?
Who's still pretty young in his own right.
I mean, Anderson's only 28, I think, and Georgiev's 22. That's an iffy situation. Montreal looking for a backup. Georgiev. I mean, I don't know what pieces they could give us in return that would really like warrant trading Georgiev away. Georgiev's been really, really good for the Rangers. He's honestly been better than Henrik Lundqvist on most nights.
I agree.
And that's not to say Lundqvist is bad. It's just like Lundqvist is old and Georgiev is 22 years old, and he's
having 15 years less on your body helps a little bit.
Right. I mean, Georgiev's the only reason the Rangers beat the Columbus Blue Jackets the other night. He made 40-something saves, I think it was 45 saves on 47 shots, and he looked unbelievable doing it. There was one save in the third period where the shot comes in, he kicks it out, the rebound goes to the faceoff circle, and Nick Foligno's like, "Oh, easy, Gino, big money." Goes to shoot it, and Georgiev comes all the way across and gets his glove on it and knocks it down, and it's like, what? Like, how can you justify trading this guy? But then you have Igor Shesterkin playing in the AHL, and the guy's sporting a 9.3 save percentage and an under 2 goals against average. So it's like, oh no, here we go. And can you conceivably scratch Henrik Lundqvist and leave him in the press box for an entire season?
Can you afford to do that with his $8 million cap hit? Can you afford to have $8 million sitting in the press box?
Can you put do you have an $8 million mentor? Like, is that really what you're like? That's essentially what he is, right? Because then he still practices with the team, and they're still learning from Henrik Lundqvist. But it's like he's not playing, and let's be honest, Henrik Lundqvist isn't the impact player he used to be. He just isn't. Like, that's not a shot at Henrik Lundqvist. I don't want anyone to misconstrue this as me not liking Henrik Lundqvist. Lundqvist is the greatest Ranger goaltender of all time, first ballot Hall of Famer, greatest goaltender to probably never win a Stanley Cup. Easy. One of the If he had retired, or if the NHL's top 100 was accurate, he probably would have been in the greatest 100 players of the last 100 years. I mean, the guy literally carried a mediocre Ranger team into the playoffs for so many years, and when the Ranger team became elite, he still carried that team. He was still better than everybody else in that team, and arguably he finished no less than 5th in Vezina Trophy voting for 10 straight seasons. That doesn't tell you something. I don't know what will. I mean, the guy was the best goaltender in the NHL from probably 2007 to roughly 2014, and when he was in his physical prime. So, I mean, can you stick him in the press box? Like, would that just be unceremonious and disrespectful to a guy who has a legacy on this team like that? I mean, yeah, probably. Would it be as disrespectful as waving Eddie Giacomin and losing him for nothing? No, probably not. But, like, seeing Henrik Lundqvist in any other jersey that isn't Ranger blue would be very, very strange. And most teams wouldn't be willing to take on the contract anyway. So it's like, well, what do we do with Henrik Lundqvist? We have to wait for the end of that contract. But, like, Georgiev, there's no, like... I don't know any teams that are like looking for goaltenders. Like, Edmonton might be an interesting trading partner, but they're locked into Mikko Koskinen for 3 more years at $4 million. Are they going to pay $4 million to have Mikko Koskinen play backup to Alexander Georgiev? I mean, Carolina might be an interesting trading partner because but they're locked into Peter Mrazek now. But Mrazek's shown he's pretty inconsistent.
What about San Jose?
What does San Jose have to offer the Rangers in return is the issue.
That's the problem.
Because they don't have any prospects in the pipeline because they've been competitive for so long, so their draft picks aren't great. I mean, I think Ryan Merkley's in their system, but Ryan Merkley's proven to be kind of like a head case in junior, and I mean, like, while he's a great puck-moving, point-producing defenseman, is that really something? We already have we already have D'Angelo, who we had to do that with.
I'm just spitballing here. I don't know if the cap hits work, whatever. Ottawa Senators for J.G. Pajot.
That'd be interesting. I'd be willing to look at that, because, I mean, J.G. Pajot is a good player. He'd add some goal scoring to the Rangers that, like, isn't there. I mean, he had an amazing month in November. And he adds a little more, like, north-south, grinded out hockey, some meat and potatoes to the Rangers lineup that's got a lot of skill up front. I mean, he essentially would do what JT Miller did for Vancouver, which is add some, grit and some sandpaper to a lineup, while also providing offense. I mean, another team that might be looking for a goaltender. Buffalo is an interesting one, because could we pry Casey Middlestat out of there? Could we get somebody like that? I mean, that's a really
Detroit.
But, like, what do you get from Detroit? Like, we're not going to get, like, Anthony Mantha. I mean, Philip Zadina, honestly, has been underperforming in Detroit, and Detroit doesn't seem to know how to use him. So, I mean, you could trade an overperforming goaltender, or like a stellar goaltender, for an underperforming winger who got drafted in the top 3 with the potential to be just as good as Andrei Svechnikov in his prime. I mean, that'd be an interesting one. Even Vegas might be an interesting partner, because Fleury's not going to be around that much longer, and you might be able to get somebody out of there that's, like, younger, because they're looking to win now. So their pipeline they're looking to move guys out of that pipeline if they can.
Well, you could probably get Subban, and I think Subban would be comfortable backing up Lundqvist for a year and then backing up Shesterkin the next year.
Or splitting with Shesterkin the next season.
Because I don't know him, obviously. I'm not like Malcolm Subban's best friend. I can't call him up and ask him what he's thinking. But I think just based on his career, you could make a very significant argument to say, hey, look, you're a good backup, but let's not pretend that you're going to be starting 60 games.
Yeah. And some guys, like, acknowledge that. And I'm sure honestly, like, that might be fine. That might be a perfect solution to this problem. And then I'm just trying to think of other teams. Like, Dallas doesn't have a goaltending issue. I mean, in reality, Chicago's goaltending is kind of iffy, but they're locked into those goaltenders for so long.
Well, I think I think Robin Leonard has been really good for them. It's just the issue of
Corey Crawford.
Can you get a guy who, let's not beat around the bush. Corey Crawford has a bit of an ego on him. Could you get a guy like him to admit, hey, like, I'm not where I'm supposed to be at, and maybe split time, because he's already splitting time with Robin Leonard, but Robin Leonard's been in the league for a long time. Could you get a guy like him to split time with a 22-year-old?
Right. I mean, it'd be tough.
Even L.A., but they have Jack Campbell.
And they're probably banking on Jack Campbell taking over when Jonathan Quick calls it quits. Because let's be honest, Jonathan Quick's not the same player he used to be.
It's an interesting situation.
I mean, Anaheim wouldn't be a trade. Really,
Yeah,
probably
John
wouldn't be in the market, because they have
Gibson.
John Gibson, who's only 25, who they're wasting anyway. Arizona has 2 good goalies already. Colorado's got Philip Grubauer's proved he can do it. Francouz, yeah.
Columbus is giving the reins to Korpisalo.
And Korpisalo's been good. He's been good for them. He hasn't been terrible.
But the management has shown, like, this is our guy.
Yeah, they wouldn't be willing to look to move to somebody else, even if it was somebody like Alexander Georgiev, who's proving, like, he came from relatively nowhere. I don't even remember how the Rangers got him. I don't know if he was like a late round pick or whatever, but comes up to the AHL, comes into the NHL, and is proving like he's an absolute monster. And he really wasn't that great in the AHL. Like, he had some okay seasons, like he had some okay numbers. He came up and he's been better at the NHL level than he's ever been at the AHL level, which I think is really, really interesting, because the better the competition got, the better he got. And to be fair, he's working with Benoit Allaire, who's really refining his game and moving the rough edges off of it. And he's become, I mean, he's fun to watch. He's exciting. He's explosive when he has to be, but, like, for the most part, he's very controlled. He keeps the game in check. He's always very square to shooters. There's a lot to really like about Alexander Georgiev's game, and it's not like, this isn't like me as a Rangers fan saying I want to get rid of him. It's just like it just looks like we have to.
Because he probably should be starting.
Yeah, and it's like you can't. And with Shesterkin, who's coming almost pretty much as advertised.
Well, like I said, it's pretty much the biggest issue is that one extra year on the Henrik Lundqvist contract. Because let's be honest here, if Lundqvist's contract expires, you as Rangers management have every right to say, we love what you did for the team. We know how big of an impact you've had on this team, but we now have 2 goalies that are young. The core is young. Thank you for your service, Lundqvist, but it doesn't fit with our plans.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's totally reasonable.
I think Lundqvist's response is either he can retire and become retire a New York Ranger, or go somewhere else and swallow his pride and be a backup. And I know in Henrik Lundqvist, I'm pretty sure he'd probably take the retirement option over going to be a backup because Lundqvist, let's be honest, not that he's an ego, but like there's a lot of pride there. I mean, like there should be. I mean, he's
very warranted.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, he was the best goaltender in the NHL for like 7 years. So like there's a lot of pride that's warranted on his end. So like I don't know if he'd want to be a backup. He's also not.
It also takes the heat off of management because now this is a Lundqvist decision to either retire or play.
Right. And it's like we laid it out to him, like, and you make that very clear early in the season, like, hey Hank, like, we love what you did, but like at the end of the year comes, like this contract comes up, like you're not in our plans because
the age just doesn't fit.
Because you're 39, you're gonna be 39, almost 40. The team, we're fielding guys. We have 8 players under 21 on the lineup this year alone, and we're only gonna be getting we're only looking to get younger. It's like. It just doesn't fit. And while like a veteran presence is good to have and be a stabilizing force, we're kind of stuck with Mark Stahl to do that. Like Mark Stahl is kind of like the veteran in the room. I mean, even like Mika Zibanejad's a veteran. We have Artemi Panarin who'll be 29 at the end of the year. Like you have guys who can take a young core and guide them who aren't old, like who are also themselves younger. We don't need a 40-year-old Henrik Lundqvist on the roster, and we don't need a 40-year-old Henrik Lundqvist whose performance has been declining every season, even though advanced stats are showing that he's playing one of the best years of his career. Because of the high danger shots he's facing and the expected goals against that he's making saves on, it's just like he just doesn't fit, especially when you have a 22-year-old Georgiev and a 24-year-old Shesterkin.
But unfortunately, all of that just being speculation because he has that one extra year.
Right.
So now this isn't a Lundqvist decision to retire. This is a management has to fix this problem.
And it's like, I mean, like, in theory, management could come to Lundqvist this year and be like, hey, Hank, like, listen, like, that one extra year, it's really not great for us. Like, would you consider retiring? Because if not, we're going to ask you to, like, look to waive your no-move clause, your full no-movement clause. We're going to need that list of teams that you're willing to waive it for so we can try to make this work. And
then that's kind of a sticky situation.
I mean, it still sends, like, it's still a management decision at that point. Because it sends the message to the fan base that, like, listen, Henrik Lundqvist is out, we're getting rid of Henrik Lundqvist. When in reality, like, the emotions will be frayed, but like the reality is like
this is
a hockey decision,
right? This isn't a screw you Henrik Lundqvist decision. This is like we have too many good goaltenders.
Like we as a Rangers have done a great job of developing goaltenders the last 10 years, and we've had to trade all of our younger ones because Lundqvist has been young enough to stay in his prime and continue to win games for us. But whereas now it's like we've developed 2 really good young goaltenders, and we can't justify keeping Henrik Lundqvist on the roster in their stead because we just can't. I mean, how can you justify having a 38-year-old Henrik Lundqvist on the roster over a 22-year-old Alexander Georgiev who's proving that he's probably playing better than Lundqvist right now, has been the best goaltender for the Rangers all season after having a couple stinkers in games. He had a couple clunkers. The one in Montreal wasn't great, and then the one after it wasn't great. But I mean, Lundqvist hasn't looked great either. But then like the next 3 games he's played, he's been an absolute monster. Georgiev. He's 2-1-0 in those 3 games. And he got back-to-back starts on back-to-back nights. He goes into Columbus and wins with 45 saves, and then he comes back the next night in New York and plays the Canadiens to a 2-1 loss, but in a goaltender's duel between him and Carey Price, and arguably outduels Carey Price. I mean,
it's just it's a sticky situation, but unfortunately, it looks more and more like
Georgiev's on the outs.
Man out. So, I do, do you have anything else you want to say kind of last minute before we wrap up?
Not really. I just think, like, going back to the original question of, like, would you trade him to the Devils? I mean, not really. Probably not. Like, you just see him 6 times a year. I don't want to make the Devils that much better. And adding Taylor Hall to the Rangers lineup really doesn't make a lot of sense because I don't think there's any room
it's
in
not
our...
solving the problem.
I don't think there's any room in our top 6, really, because you have to play Chris Kreider in that position until you can trade him.
It's not solving the center or the defense issue.
Right, exactly.
So next week, I do want to look at the Lightning because, I mean, they're probably... I want to look at the Lightning and the Predators next week because they're probably 2 of the
most disappointing teams in the NHL.
Biggest anomalies when you just look at the roster on paper. And anything else that comes up, I mean, we are starting to get towards All-Star stuff, so maybe we can take a look at that once the voting starts coming in. So next week, maybe Lightning, maybe Predators, unless they turn it around and like win 6 in a row, and it's like, what's the point?
Yeah.
As always, we kind of play it by ear, but that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you guys for listening, and we will see you guys next time.
See ya.